The corridor of Harmony's Edge station stretched endlessly in both directions, its walls made of some alien metal that shifted colors with the light. Taman walked slowly, still getting used to the artificial gravity that felt too light under his feet. 3 months as Earth's newest ambassador to the Galactic Council, and he still felt like a child playing dress-up in his formal uniform. The station housed representatives from 47 different species, each more advanced than humanity in their own way. The Velkari had mastered energy manipulation. The Horth could bend space itself. The Quental lived for thousands of years and remembered the birth of stars. And then there were humans, barely into space for 2 centuries, still using chemical rockets when others had forgotten such crude methods millennia ago. Taman paused outside the observation deck, hearing voices inside. He recognized the melodic tones of Counselor Velthari, the Velkari representative who always spoke to him like he was an interesting pet that had learned to walk upright. The quarantine zones remain stable, Velthari was saying to someone, though I confess the persistence of that ancient signal continues to puzzle our scientists. Which signal? Asked another voice, deeper and more mechanical. Taman thought it might be Counselor Kextor from the Mechanist Coalition, the one from the Kethmoran system. It has been broadcasting for 3,047 standard years now. Same message, same frequency, same desperate plea for assistance. Taman felt his stomach tighten. A distress signal that had been going for over 3,000 years? He pressed himself closer to the wall, listening. Remind me of the details, Kextor requested. My memory banks classify it as a Class 7 quarantine zone, but the specific reason escapes my immediate recall. Velthari made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. What passed for a sigh among her people. The Kethmoran were a peaceful species, very advanced in crystalline technology and dimensional research. They established several colonies and trading posts throughout that sector. Then, approximately 3,000 years ago, all communication ceased. The only thing left is an automated distress beacon repeating the same message. And the message? Fragments mostly. Something about shadows coming through rifts. Children trapped in deep stations. The usual pleas for help that one might expect from a dying civilization. Velthari's voice carried no emotion, as if she were discussing the weather. Taman's hands clenched into fists. Dying civilization. Children trapped. And they spoke of it like reading old data reports. Has anyone responded to investigate? Kextor asked. Of course not. Velthari sounded surprised by the question. Standard protocol classifies unknown threats as potentially civilization-ending. The Kethmoran clearly encountered something beyond their ability to handle. Why would any rational species risk exposing themselves to the same fate? Logical, Kextor agreed. The survival of known civilizations takes priority over investigating the destruction of unknown ones. Precisely. Though I must admit, since the humans joined the Council, several members have privately expressed concern that they might not follow such logical protocols. Taman felt ice in his veins. They were talking about his species. The humans do seem to lack proper self-preservation instincts, Kextor observed. Their historical records are full of instances where they risked everything to help strangers. Quite disturbing, really. Indeed. Their planet produced them through constant warfare and natural disasters. It explains their tendency toward irrational heroics. They simply do not understand that some calls for help should not be answered. Taman had heard enough. He turned and walked quickly toward the human quarters, his mind racing. 3,000 years. An entire civilization crying for help for 3,000 years. And nobody had even tried to answer. His quarters were small but comfortable, with a direct communication link to Earth. Taman activated the system and waited for the connection to establish. The face that appeared on the screen was weathered and scarred. Admiral Boram, commander of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Taman, Boram said with a slight smile. You look troubled. The Council giving you problems again? Admiral, I need to ask you something and I need you to take it seriously. Boram's expression shifted immediately. Go ahead. If you received a distress signal from an unknown source, possibly dangerous, what would you do? Investigate, Boram answered without hesitation. Why? Even if it meant risking your ship and crew. Son, that's what we're here for. You can't help people from the safety of your own home. Boram leaned forward. What did you find? Taman took a deep breath and told her everything. The Kethmoran system, the 3,000-year-old distress signal, The galactic community's decision to simply ignore it because responding might be dangerous. When he finished, Boram was quiet for a long moment.
3,000 years, she finally said. 3,047.
According to Velthari. And nobody even went to look. They filed it under too dangerous to investigate. Boram's jaw tightened. What do we know about this Kethmaran species? Peaceful, advanced. They were traders and researchers. Whatever happened to them, it happened fast. And they had children. According to the signal fragments, yes. Boram stood up, moving out of the camera's view. Taemin could hear her pacing. 3,000 years, she repeated. Some parent out there sent a signal asking for someone to save their children, and it's been echoing through space ever since. Admiral, the other species think we're dangerously irrational. If we respond to this, it might damage our standing with the Council. Boram came back into view, and Taemin recognized the expression on her face. He had seen it before when she made decisions that changed everything. Son, let me tell you something about standing. You can stand tall with the respect of cowards, or you can stand up for what's right. I know which one lets me sleep at night. So you'll investigate? I'll do more than investigate. I'll put together a task force. If there are people out there who need help, they're going to get it. Even if it took us 3,000 years to hear them, the Council won't approve it. Then we won't ask for approval. Boram's smile was sharp. We're still a sovereign species, last I checked. And we've never needed permission to do the right thing. The connection ended, leaving Taemin alone in his quarters. Outside his window, the stars looked different now. Somewhere out there, a signal was still broadcasting, still asking for help. For 3,000 years, it had called into the darkness, and the darkness had answered with silence. But not anymore. Taemin activated his personal log. Ambassador's Note, Day 93. Today I learned the difference between being civilized and being human. The galaxy may never forgive us for it, but some things are more important than forgiveness. He looked out at the stars again. Soon, very soon, someone would finally answer that call. The research vessel Perseverance dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that ran through every deck. Captain Do-hyun gripped his command chair as the ship's systems fought to make sense of what lay before them. The view screen flickered, unable to process the conflicting data from their sensors. Status report, Do-hyun called out, his voice steady despite the chaos on the bridge. Chief Science Officer Hee-jin looked up from her console, her face pale. Captain, our instruments are giving us readings that shouldn't be possible. The gravitational fields in this system are completely wrong. Define wrong. Space itself is twisted here. Gravity wells where there should be empty space. Energy signatures that pulse like a heartbeat. And sir, she paused, checking her readings again. The distress signal isn't coming from a fixed location. Do-hyun turned to face her.
What do you mean?
It's moving. Whatever is broadcasting that signal, it's traveling through the system in a pattern I can't identify. Communications Officer Jae-wook suddenly straightened at his station. Captain, I'm picking up something else. A subsonic frequency underlying the distress signal. It's so low it's almost below our equipment's range. Put it through the speakers. The bridge filled with a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. It was like the groaning of metal under stress, mixed with something that might have been breathing. Deep, rhythmic, and wrong in a way that made their instincts scream warnings. Turn it off, Do-hyun ordered. How long until we reach the source of the signal? Navigator Kyung-soo consulted his displays. 2 hours at current speed, sir. But Captain, I'm having trouble plotting a safe course. The space between here and the signal source is full of anomalies that shouldn't exist. Do-hyun studied the tactical display. The Kethmaran system had once held 6 planets and 2 asteroid belts. Now there were only 4 planets, and they were wrong. Their orbits made no sense, and 2 of them were slowly rotating around empty space as if something invisible was still there. Take us in slowly, he ordered. Full sensor sweeps. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close. The next 2 hours felt like days. As they moved deeper into the system, the wrongness became more pronounced. Sensors detected mass where nothing should be. Energy readings spiked and fell in patterns that hurt to think about. And always that underlying subsonic pulse that seemed to sync with their heartbeats. Contact, Hee-jin announced suddenly. Dead ahead, distance. Captain, this can't be right. What are you seeing? It's massive. Easily the size of Earth's moon. But the mass readings are inconsistent. Sometimes it registers as solid matter, sometimes as energy, sometimes as nothing at all. Do-hyun stepped forward to look at her screen. The object appeared to be part space station and part organic growth. Its surface was covered in a crystalline substance that pulsed with bioluminescent light in patterns that seemed almost like writing. "That's where the signal is coming from?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "And Captain, life signs are weak, but they're there. Someone is still alive in that thing." Jawook suddenly perked up at his station. "I'm getting something." "A transmission. Very weak." "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was thin and weary, speaking in a language the computer struggled to translate. Who answered?" "Please tell me you are real. We have been waiting so long, hoping someone would hear us." Do-hyun stepped forward. "This is Captain Do-hyun of the Earth vessel Perseverance. We received your distress signal. What is your situation?" A long pause. Then a sound that might have been crying. "Earth? We do not know this name, but you came. After all this time, someone finally came. But please be careful. The Void Touched are still here. They never leave. Void Touched? The things that came through the rifts. The shadows that hunger. We have held them back for so long, but we grow weak. Soon we will fail, and they will spread into your reality." Do-hyun exchanged glances with his crew. "How many of you are left?" 17. Once we were millions. We gave our lives to maintain the barriers, to keep the darkness contained. But it is not enough. It will never be enough. The captain made his decision. "We're coming aboard. Can you guide us to a safe docking point?" "No." The voice was suddenly urgent. "You must not come here. You must flee while you can. This place is cursed. We should have destroyed ourselves long ago, but we always hoped someone would answer our call." "Someone did answer," Do-hyun said firmly. "We're not leaving." He turned to his crew. "Marine Commander Sung-ho, prepare a boarding party. Full combat gear and scientific equipment. Dr. Mi-young, I want you leading the xenobiological team." "Sir," Hyejin interrupted, "I'm detecting energy buildups throughout that structure. Whatever containment systems they have, they're fluctuating." "How long do we have?" "Unknown, but based on the power decay rates, not long." Do-hyun activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We came here to answer a distress call, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We don't know what we're facing, but we know people need help. That's enough." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. 50 volunteers, every one of them. They had all known this mission might be dangerous when they signed up, but none of them had imagined anything like this. "The galaxy has been ignoring this signal for 3,000 years, he continued. "They decided it was too dangerous to investigate. Maybe they're right. Maybe we're about to make the biggest mistake in human history. But I'd rather make that mistake than live with the knowledge that we had a chance to help and chose not to take it." The bridge was quiet except for the hum of the ship's systems and that underlying pulse that seemed to come from the structure. "Head Commander Seung-ho," Do-hyun said. "How soon can your team be ready?" "Give me 20 minutes, sir." Dr. Mi-young. "Ready when they are, Captain." Do-hyun nodded and returned to his command chair. On the view screen, the massive structure continued to pulse with its alien light. Somewhere inside, 17 beings were fighting a battle they had been losing for 3 millennia. They had called for help, and help had finally arrived. The fact that it had taken 3,000 years didn't matter. The fact that every other civilization in the galaxy had deemed it too dangerous to attempt didn't matter either. "Mr. Jawook," Do-hyun said, "send a message back to Admiral Boram. Tell her we've made contact with survivors. Tell her," he paused, trying to find the right words, "tell her that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is the right thing to do." The ship moved closer to the structure, and the pulse grew stronger. Whatever waited inside, they would face it together. That was what humans did. That was what made them human. The airlock hissed open, and Commander Seung-ho stepped into hell. The interior of the Kethmaran structure defied understanding. Walls that should have been metal or stone were instead made of living crystal that pulsed with internal light. The corridors twisted in directions that hurt to follow, and gravity seemed to shift with each step. Behind him, Dr. Mi-young and her scientific team moved carefully, their instruments giving readings that made no sense. "Temperature is constant," Mi-young reported through the comm link. "Atmosphere is breathable, but there are trace elements I've never seen before. And the energy readings," she paused. "It's like the entire structure is alive." "Stay alert," Sung-ho ordered his Marines. "We don't know what we're walking into." They followed a corridor that seemed to stretch forever, guided by weak energy signatures that Dr. Mi-young insisted were consistent with life forms. The walls around them were covered in what looked like writing, but the symbols shifted and changed as they watched, rearranging themselves into new patterns. "Commander," one of his Marines called out. "Movement ahead." Sung-Ho raised his weapon, then lowered it as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and thin, made of the same crystalline material as the walls but shaped roughly like a human. Its surface was cracked and dim, and it moved with the careful steps of someone who had been wounded. "You came," it said, its voice echoing strangely in the corridor. "You actually came." Dr. Mi-Young stepped forward, her translation device working to interpret the alien speech patterns. "Are you Kethmoran? I am Thaisara, last speaker of the deep stations. We are the 17 who remain." The alien's form flickered slightly as if it was having trouble maintaining its shape. "Follow me. There is much you must understand before the barriers fail completely." They walked deeper into the structure, and Sung-Ho noticed that his Marines were becoming increasingly uneasy. The subsonic pulse they had detected from the ship was stronger here, and it seemed to sync with their heartbeats in a way that felt invasive. "Thaisara," Dr. Mi-Young said. "What happened here? Your distress signal mentioned something about shadows and rifts." The Kethmoran stopped walking. "We were explorers like you. We wanted to understand the nature of reality itself. In our laboratories, we built devices that could peer into the spaces between dimensions. The void between, we called it. And something was looking back, Sung-Ho guessed. Something that should never have been disturbed. The void between is not empty, Commander. It is full of things that exist only to consume and corrupt. When our experiments created the first microscopic rifts, they noticed. They reached a vast chamber filled with what looked like cocoons made of crystal. Inside each one, Sung-Ho could see the dim outline of a Kethmoran figure, motionless but somehow still alive. "My people," Thaisara explained. "They gave their life force to power the containment barriers. Each one burns away slowly, their essence converted into energy that holds back the void touched. For 3,000 years?" Dr. Mi-Young asked in horror. "We hoped someone would answer our call. We hoped you would find a way to seal the rifts permanently, before we all burned away to nothing." Thaisara moved to one of the cocoons and placed a crystalline hand against its surface. "This is Morthak, my research partner. He has been dying for 2,000 years to maintain Barrier 7. Sung-Ho felt sick. "How many barriers are there?" 43. 7 have already failed as their guardians finally died. When the last barrier falls, the void touched will pour into your reality and begin consuming everything they touch. "Show us," Dr. Mi-Young said quietly. Thaisara led them to an observation platform overlooking the deepest part of the structure. Below them, massive tiers in space hung in the air like wounds in reality itself. Through the tiers, Sung-Ho could see movement. Things that seemed to be made of living shadow pressing against barriers of crystalline energy. "The void. Touched," Thaisara said. "They exist partially outside of normal physics. They cannot be killed because they are not truly alive. They cannot be reasoned with because they are hunger-given form. They exist only to consume the life and order of our dimension." As they watched, one of the barriers flickered. Immediately, a tentacle of pure darkness pushed through the gap before the barrier reformed. Where the tentacle had touched the chamber wall, the crystal turned black and began to crumble. "How long do you have?" Sung-Ho asked. "Days, perhaps hours. The barriers grow weaker as more of my people die, and we cannot replace them fast enough." Dr. Mi-Young was scanning the barriers with her equipment. The energy patterns are incredibly complex. It's like they're weaving reality itself into a net to contain something that doesn't belong in our universe. "That is exactly what we are doing," Thaisara confirmed. "But the net has holes and more appear every day." Sung-Ho activated his comm link. "Captain Do-hyun, we need immediate reinforcement." "And, sir, we're going to need every ship Earth can spare." "Explain." "The Kethmoran have been fighting a holding action against things that want to eat our entire dimension. They're losing. When they lose, everything dies." A long pause. "Understood. How can we help?" "We don't know yet. But, Captain, this is bigger than a rescue mission. This is about saving everything that exists." Thaisara looked at the humans with something that might have been hope. "Your species is very young, but you came when no one else would. Perhaps your youth will give you the strength to do what we could not." "What's that?" Dr. Mi-Young asked. "Find a way to win." Another barrier flickered and more shadow stuff pressed through. The corruption spread a little further into their reality. "We need to get back to the ship," Sung-Ho decided. We need to report what we found and figure out how to help. There may be no help possible, Thaisara said sadly. We have tried everything. The void touched adapt to every weapon, counter every strategy. They are entropy made manifest. Maybe, Xiongho replied. But we're humans. We don't know when to quit. As they made their way back to the airlock, Dr. Mi Young was already analyzing the data from her scans. The barrier technology is beyond anything we understand, but the principle might be adaptable. If we could find a way to strengthen it or create new barriers, could humans power the barriers like the Kethmaran do? Xiongho asked. I don't know. Our neural patterns are completely different. It might not work at all, or, she paused, or it might work better. They reached the airlock and Xiongho took one last look at the alien structure. Somewhere inside, 17 beings were dying slowly to protect a galaxy that had forgotten they existed. They had been heroes for 3,000 years and no one even knew their names. We're going to help you, he said to Thaisara. I don't know how, but we're going to find a way. I hope so, Commander. But if you cannot, please remember us. Remember that we tried. We'll remember, Sung-Ho promised. But you're not dead yet, and neither are we. The airlock sealed behind them, but Sung-Ho knew they would be back. They had to be. The alternative was too terrible to consider. Behind them, the barriers held. For now. Captain Do-hyun stared at the tactical display showing the growing fleet around the Kethmoran structure. What had started as a single research vessel had become the largest human military gathering in their brief spacefaring history. Admiral Bo-Ram's flagship, the Determination, hung in space alongside 12 other ships, their crews working frantically to understand an enemy that shouldn't exist. Status report. Do-hyun requested as he entered the briefing room aboard the Determination. Engineer Kyung-soo looked up from a holographic display showing the structure's barrier systems. The good news is that Dr. Mi Young was right about the adaptability of human neural patterns. Our brainwaves can interface with the Kethmoran containment technology. And the bad news? It will kill whoever tries it. Slowly and painfully, Admiral Bo-Ram entered the room, her expression grim. I've been in contact with the Galactic Council. They're not pleased with our presence here. What did they say? Do-hyun asked. 3 fleets are positioning themselves at the edge of the system. Officially, they're here to contain any contamination that might escape. Unofficially, they're here to destroy any ship that tries to leave. They want to keep this secret. They want us all to die quietly so they can pretend this never happened, Bo-Ram said bluntly. The Council has decided that the potential threat justifies sacrificing one primitive species to protect 47 advanced ones. Dr. Mi Young looked up from her research station. Have you told them what we're actually facing here? I tried. They classified my report as hysterical speculation and ordered me to withdraw immediately. So we're on our own. We've always been on our own, Bo-Ram replied. The question is whether we can actually do anything to help. Kyung-soo activated his display. I think we can. The Kethmoran barriers work by using life force to create a kind of immune response in reality itself. They're teaching space-time to recognize the void touched as a foreign presence and reject them. But the Kethmoran are dying faster than they can maintain the barriers, Dr. Mi Young added. Each one can only power a barrier for a few years before burning out completely. Humans might last longer, Kyung-soo said. Our neural patterns are more chaotic, more adaptable. Where a Kethmoran mind creates a steady, consistent barrier, a human mind might create something stronger but more unpredictable. Do-hyun studied the readouts. How many volunteers would we need? For a temporary solution? Maybe 50. But Captain, this isn't about creating a permanent fix. The rifts are getting bigger. Soon no amount of barrier energy will be enough to contain them. Then what do you suggest? Dr. Mi Young manipulated the holographic display, showing the structure of the rifts themselves. I've been studying the void touched. They're not just random monsters. They're the universe's immune system responding to a cosmic infection. What kind of infection? The Kethmoran experiments didn't just open doorways to another dimension. They introduced a conceptual virus into reality itself. The void touched are trying to eliminate the infection by consuming everything it has touched, including the Kethmoran, including our entire dimension. Eventually, the room fell silent. Finally, Admiral Bo-Ram spoke. Is there a cure? Theoretically, yes, but it would require someone to voluntarily expose themselves to the conceptual virus and then burn it out from within using their own life force. It's not just a death sentence. It's asking someone to let themselves be partially consumed by cosmic horror and then destroy it through sheer willpower. How many people would it take? Everyone on this fleet. Maybe more. Du-hyun looked around the room at his colleagues. And if we do nothing? The barriers fail within days. The void touched consumed this system, then spread to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Everything dies, Boram stood up. I'll address the fleet. An hour later, every human in the system listened as their admiral explained the situation. The choice was simple: sacrifice themselves to save a galaxy that considered them primitive and dangerous, or watch everything they had ever known be consumed by living darkness. The response was immediate and unanimous. Every ship volunteered. Every crew member signed up. When the Galactic Council fleets detected the human preparations and demanded an explanation, Boram's response was broadcast on all frequencies. For 3,000 years, a species called the Kethmaran has been dying to protect you from something you don't understand. They called for help and you ignored them. Now that help has arrived. You try to stop us because you're afraid of what it might cost you. We're not afraid. This is what humans do. The alien response was swift. You will cease your interference immediately or face the consequences. The consequences of helping people in need? Boram laughed. Admiral, that's called being human. You might want to try it sometime. The first wave of void touched broke free 2 hours later. Captain Do-hyun watched from the bridge of the Perseverance as reality tore open like fabric. The things that poured through were worse than nightmares, shapes that hurt to perceive, moving in ways that violated physics. They touched the hull of a Kethmaran defense satellite, and it simply ceased to exist, leaving behind empty space that felt wrong. All ships, begin the procedure, Boram ordered. The human fleet spread out around the structure, each ship taking position near one of the failing barriers. In the engineering sections, volunteers lay down on specially modified medical beds, connected to the Kethmoran containment systems through neural interfaces that Kyung-soo had designed in desperation. Du-hyun was one of the first to connect. The sensation was indescribable, like having his mind stretched across space and time, feeling the texture of reality itself. He could sense the rifts as wounds in existence and the void touched as an infection spreading through the wound. But he could also feel his crew, his fellow humans, their minds linked through the system. Where the Kethmaran had fought alone, the humans fought together. Their combined will began to push back against the cosmic infection, not just containing it, but actively healing the damage it had caused. It's working, Dr. Mi-young reported from her station, even as her own life force began to drain into the barriers. The rifts are stabilizing. The battle raged for 3 days. One by one, the human volunteers burned out, their life force converted into healing energy that sealed tears in reality. The void touched fought back, adapting to each new strategy, but they couldn't adapt fast enough to match human unpredictability. On the 3rd day, something unprecedented happened. The rifts didn't just close, they healed completely, leaving space-time stronger than it had been before the Kethmoran experiments. The cosmic infection was gone, burned away by the sacrifice of 800 human lives. Du-hyun felt himself fading as his neural patterns finally overloaded. Around him, his bridge crew was dying at their stations, but they were smiling. They had done the impossible. Captain, Jae-wook whispered with his last breath. Look at the stars. Du-hyun turned to the view screen and saw something that made him forget his pain. Every star in the visible galaxy was flickering in perfect synchronization, as if the universe itself was acknowledging their sacrifice. We did it, he said to no one in particular. We actually did it. The Perseverance drifted in space, its crew dead but its mission complete. Around the system, the surviving human ships began rescue operations, picking up the few crew members who had survived the procedure. There weren't many, but they had won, against all odds, using nothing but stubborn determination and a willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. Humanity had saved the galaxy. Now they just had to hope the galaxy would remember. 6 months after the Battle of Kethmoran, Ambassador Taemin stood before the full Galactic Council in the Great Assembly Hall of Harmony's Edge. The chamber was different now. Where once there had been 47 species represented, now there were 48. The Kethmaran had been given a seat of honor, though only 3 of their kind had survived the long vigil. Thisara sat in the crystalline chair designed for her people, her form brighter than it had been in millennia. The healing of the rifts had somehow restored some of her lost life force, though she still moved with the careful dignity of someone who had seen too much. The memorial beacon network is now complete, Councillor Velthari announced to the assembly. 1,047 beacons throughout the galaxy, each broadcasting the story of the Kethmaran vigil and the human response. Taemin listened with mixed feelings. The galaxy had indeed remembered, but not in the way he had expected. The other species didn't speak of humanity with gratitude so much as with a kind of awed terror. They had watched humans do something that every other civilization considered impossible, and it frightened them. The question before us today, continued Velthari, is how to integrate this new knowledge into our understanding of galactic civilization. Councillor Kextor spoke next, his mechanical voice carrying undertones of confusion. The human response violated every principle of rational self-preservation. By all logical calculations, their intervention should have failed catastrophically. Yet it succeeded, noted Councillor Yarthal of the Quantum Collective. The rifts are sealed. The void touched are gone. The galaxy is safe. At the cost of 800 lives, Velthari pointed out. Lives that were sacrificed for strangers they had never met, fighting an enemy they barely understood. Thisara spoke for the first time. Her voice was like music played on crystal chimes, but it carried depths of sorrow and wonder that made the entire assembly fall silent. For 3,000 years, we called into the darkness and only darkness answered. We died alone, believing we were forgotten, but we were not forgotten. Someone was listening. Someone cared enough to risk everything for people they had never met. She turned her crystalline gaze toward Taemin. The humans teach us something we had forgotten in our pursuit of logic and safety. That civilization is not measured by what we refuse to risk, but by what we are willing to sacrifice for others. A beautiful sentiment, Velthari replied, but dangerous. If every species followed the human example, we would have no civilizations left, only heroic extinctions. Would that be so terrible? Asked a new voice. Every head in the chamber turned. At the back of the assembly, a young Velkari stood up. Taemin recognized her as Velnara, one of the junior staff members from the station's communications department. Councillor Velnara, Velthari said with obvious disapproval, you are out of order. With respect, Elder, I believe the order itself may be wrong. Velnara stepped forward. I have been monitoring the galaxy's communication network since the Kethmaran memorial beacons began broadcasting. Do you know what I've found? Enlighten us, Velthari said dryly. Distress signals. Hundreds of them. Calls for help from species we have never met. From disasters we have classified as too dangerous to investigate. How from people who need rescue but whom we have deemed not worth the risk. The chamber stirred uneasily. Velnara continued. For the first time in recorded galactic history, those signals are being answered. Not by us, but by species who watched the human response and decided they wanted to be more like them. The Horth have dispatched rescue fleets to 3 different systems. The Quental are sharing their medical technology with species they previously considered beneath their notice. Even the Mechanus Coalition has begun investigating ancient quarantine zones. Reckless behavior, Velthari protested. They will get themselves killed. Some of them will, Velnara agreed. But others will save lives. Others will find new allies, new friends, new ways of understanding the universe. The humans have shown us that the greatest risk is not in reaching out to help others. It is in becoming so afraid of danger that we stop being who we want to be. Councillor Kextor processed this for several seconds. You are suggesting that the human model of irrational heroism should be adopted as standard galactic policy? I am suggesting that there is nothing irrational about caring for others, Velnara replied. The humans looked at an impossible situation and asked not, how can we avoid this danger? But how can we help? Perhaps it is time we asked the same question. The debate continued for hours, but Taemin could see the shift happening. The younger representatives, those who had not spent centuries perfecting the art of careful non-interference, were listening to Velnara with growing interest. The older counselors were horrified, but they were also outnumbered. When the session finally ended, Taemin found himself walking beside Thisara through the station's corridors. Your people have changed something fundamental, she told him. Not just by saving us, but by showing others what is possible when you refuse to accept that someone else's tragedy is not your problem. Is that good or bad? I do not know, but I know it is right. They paused at an observation deck overlooking the stars. In the distance, Taemin could see ships from a dozen different species heading out into the galaxy, responding to calls for help that would have been ignored just months ago. The galaxy will never be the same, Thaisara observed. No, Taemin agreed. It will be better. 3 months later, Taemin received a message from Admiral Boram. She was commanding a joint task force, investigating a distress signal from the Outer Rim, signal that had been broadcasting for only 2 days before 5. Different species responded simultaneously. The universe is getting smaller, Boram wrote. Or maybe we're just getting braver. Taemin smiled and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were in trouble, and somewhere else help was on the way. Not because it was logical or safe or profitable, but because it was right. The galaxy had learned to answer when someone called for help. It had only taken humanity 3,000 years to teach them how. In his personal log that night, Taemin wrote, "Today I realized that the difference between being civilized and being human is simple. Civilization teaches you when not to act. Humanity teaches you when you must act anyway." He closed the log and looked out at the stars one more time. They didn't seem cold and distant anymore. They seemed full of possibility. Somewhere out there someone was sending a distress signal, and somewhere else someone was getting ready to answer. The silence was over.